I must say it is quite thrilling to speak to adults who are struggling to understand why they're listening to this just out of teenage person standing here and acting all professional. I'm supposed to talk about slam poetry and social change, and I'm part of the organization. I'm part of the Mumbai team of an organization called Open Sky. We organize poetry events, which means we invite poets and normally also musicians and stand-up comedians to perform at venues. We have an audience of about 60 to 70 people normally, which is primarily teenagers or people in their early 20s who are supposedly on the path of self-discovery. So poetry slams became a thing sometime last year around this time, which is when I joined Open Sky. And because before that you would find one poetry event every 2 or so weeks and in very specific places like say the Cuckoo Club or the Hive or the lesser known Cafe Verve in Thane. Today, right now, if you go on Google or on Facebook and look up poetry events, you will find at least 4 to 5 events happening over the course of this weekend. 3 of them of which I have been part or I will be part, and 3 of them happening at the same time in 4 different places. You will also find several poetry channels on YouTube like Button Poetry, Spill Poetry, Unerased Poetry, who have a massive reach. This expansion happened because Poetry Slam started doing 3 things that I have been able to identify. Firstly, they gave people a chance and a physical space to own their narratives. Narratives of heartbreak and personal growth, yes, but also narratives of mental illnesses, oppression and discrimination, which brings me to my second point. Poetry slams started a dialogue. Men in the audience started to realize they have a bone to pick with the patriarchy. Victims of violence and abuse started to realize they are not alone. People with mental illnesses realized this could be the support system they never had, and healthy people met people they could help. Granted, this happened in closed spaces with admittedly limited reach, at least at first. Granted also that this required a good amount of privilege on part of both the audience and the performers. But remember, the first step towards change is always acknowledging one's own advantage that may come in the form of privilege by virtue of belonging to a certain class, caste, or gender. However, merely acknowledging privilege is not enough. Change requires one more step, and that is using one's privilege to lend a voice to those who don't have it. Poetry allows one to adopt from a spectrum of vantage points to look at status quo. More importantly, it lends that perspective to the audience, and in the process, it burdens the audience with responsibility by making it sensitive to what it may have missed. One of my friends keeps asking me why so much of slam poetry is on sexism, feminism, misogyny, women's empowerment, body positivity, na. Which is my next point. Agency. Agency is the capacity to exert power or simply act upon a situation or the environment. One of the crucial things that hegemonic institutions seek to do is deprive the weaker groups of something, like the patriarchy deprives women of agency. But now, women's rants about being talked over, mansplained, repeated, body shamed are finally finding a place for expression thanks to small gatherings like slams where people actually come to listen to other people's narratives. Lastly, most slams are safe spaces. The term safe space is used with respect to members of the LGBTQ+ community, referring to, say, classrooms or workplaces where LGBTQ+ members are accepted. I like to extend the definition of workplaces or safe spaces to victims of abuse, people who have fought mental illnesses, and anybody who has faced injustice at the hands of the society or the state. We have had people coming out at Open Sky, some talking about their experiences as coming from the Northeast, others being suicidal and having overcome it. Because poetry often starts personal, becomes social, and then political. This evolution is only possible when one starts to identify instances of systematic discrimination, oppression, and intolerance. Slams opens doors for conversation, not just about issues, but also about expression and articulation. People get talking about a performance, how they could identify with it, what parts they loved, and also the parts they felt were unwarranted. In poetry slams, feedback is pretty immediate. If the audience doesn't like your piece because it was politically incorrect or socially insensitive, it will not let you off the hook without ensuring that you are made aware that it was not acceptable, not appreciated. A lot of people might think teenagers reciting poetry in closed rooms doesn't do anything in the direction of social change. We're looked at as a bunch of elites who can afford to attend open mics, whose homes tolerate and perhaps encourage dissent, who have had the best possible education and access to the best services. But if at the end of one slam, even 1 out of the 60 goes home and tells their parents that they learned something about something called bipolar disorder, or a stand-up comedy set that made sexist jokes that they didn't like, we have achieved something. As long as that one person is forced to critically evaluate their realities, we're doing our job and doing it well. And that's enough for now.